He
So
sucks. This guy is the real deal. Jordan?
Let me go to Jordan Lebovitz. Good morning, Jordan. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
All right. Now, I heard about this guy because Doogie does a thing with this law firm, Nurenberg Paris, and the guy that came in, and I actually met with this guy, not Jordan, but this other guy, and he goes, yeah, we have this attorney who, like, he's an attorney, but he went and he got his CDL just so he could know more about the process and all that. So you're like a famous attorney, CDL attorney guy now, Jordan.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, would you think it would be fair to say that you don't like broccoli if you never tried it?
Well, is that why you decided to do this? You went and you got your CDL in order just so you would be more knowledgeable about the process and what's involved with the law when you are doing whatever you're doing, personal injury attorney stuff for these guys. Is that why you did it?
Yeah, it's not really fair to be judgmental and to pick apart what a driver may or may not be doing when you don't really know what you're talking about. So I figured the best way to know what I'm talking about is to get the license myself.
All right. So hopefully Jordan knows what he's talking about when it comes to this case. So and now this is the second day that we've talked about this because it's this national news story. This nurse in Utah who refused to give a blood sample of an unconscious patient over to police. Now, this patient was not the suspect in the crash. It was the victim. And however, he also had a CDL. He was driving a semi-truck. He was also a reserve police officer in another state. So I don't know if that had anything. I don't know what the cops were so amped up about getting this guy's blood for. I don't know why, because this was not the suspect they were chasing. This was the guy who the suspect drove into head on. But regardless. So, Jordan, would the hospital be required to hand over that blood sample? And second of all, would the police legally be able to get a blood sample from this guy? He does have a CDL, which makes it a little bit different, I suppose, than just an average, ordinary citizen. But without his consent and without a warrant, are they able to just get your blood?
I guess just having the CDL is not as important as whether or not the person was driving a commercial motor vehicle at the time, because the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is really just the federal government's Department of Transportation that covers commercial motor vehicles, these big semi-trucks, anything that weighs over 10,001 pounds, the employer, really, the onus is on the employer, because under what's called 382.303, it's post-accident required testing. So basically, anytime someone's hurt involving a fatality or anytime there's sort of bodily injury or disabling damage to a motor vehicle requiring a towaway is what it's called, the employer is required to test any person that's performing a safety-sensitive function. All that means is that if the driver of the commercial motor vehicle is driving a semi-truck or any truck that requires a CDL, the employer has to send them to go get drug and alcohol tested. And we see this stuff all the time in our business, is when after a crash, the employer literally has another driver dispatched to the scene, picks up the person involved in the crash, take him straight to the hospital. They're required to give informed consent and give over that sample.
All right, but that's the employer that's doing it. And if the employee says, no, I'm not going to do a drug test, then they lose their CDL for a year or whatever the penalty is.
Right.
It's not law enforcement getting a drug test without a warrant.
What if you're not able to give consent?
Well, hold on. Let's not jump ahead.
Don't jump.
So, can law enforcement, even though you're driving a motor vehicle, can law enforcement take your blood without a warrant?
I don't believe so. Not if you're especially if you're the victim. It doesn't seem to make sense.
There's no probable cause in this case whatsoever. I mean, it's pretty obvious from the dash cam video that this guy's in his own lane on the highway, driving, doing everything normal, and a car careens across 3 lanes and slams into this semi-truck head on.
What if the cop thought he had cause? What if the cop thought he had cause? Can he take the blood?
What's the probable? Why would the cop think he has probable cause? What's the probable cause, Dieter? You're an idiot.
In his report, the Rover, he puts down the truck driver didn't swerve, so I think he might be on drugs.
He didn't say the car.
He didn't say that. That's not in the report. You're making crap up.
Let's say that to this lawyer. Can he answer? Can you take the blood then? Then can you take it?
First of all, if you're driving, and I explained this, I think Jordan would back this up, because, look, I'm not a lawyer, but I should have been.
Oh.
Jordan, if let's just take the CDL out. If I'm drunk and I'm driving, and I get in an accident because someone crossed 4 lanes, and they crashed into me head on. All right, I may be able to get cited for drunk driving, after the fact. But
Sure.
if you didn't cause the accident, just because you're drunk doesn't mean you're automatically at fault in an accident. Correct?
No, a lot of times we have clients who, unfortunately are intoxicated. But if you get, say you're sitting at a red light and you're intoxicated, but you get rear-ended, you didn't cause the crash. You got rear-ended. You couldn't have done anything wrong. You're just sitting there parked at a light. Right.
Dieter's argument is, well, if you weren't intoxicated, maybe you could have swerved out of the way from that oncoming car that cross lanes into your highway.
You'd be aware.
It's ridiculous, Dieter. But all right, so. So there's no legal, as far as you understand, the cops did not have the right, without probable cause, without a warrant, to take this guy's blood, even though he was driving a commercial vehicle. He is the victim. Even though he was driving a commercial vehicle, they cannot force the nurse in this case to take the blood, or even force the patient is unconscious. He can't consent, and they have no warrant. There's no way they can force anyone to get that blood, correct?
Well, was he, and again, I'm not 100% certain of all the facts and the circumstances of this crash. Was he driving a commercial motor vehicle at the time, or was he just a CDL holder?
He was driving a commercial vehicle at the time. He was driving a semi-truck.
At the end of the day, then, the employer is going to do that test.
Sure, but it's on the employer, right? So it's on the employer, and if the guy refuses, he just loses his CDL. Like, that's it. What I'm saying is, to me, there's a big leap between being compelled to forcibly give blood without your consent while you're unconscious, and having your employer do the drug test. Sure, when you get your CDL and when you have your employment agreement with your employer, you say, sure, you can drug test me, whatever. But the worst that can happen is you refuse, and your license is taken away for a year if you refuse.
That's right. It'd be suspended for life. For life,
really?
Yeah.
Wow. For the CDL,
horrible.
So if you refuse, they would just you basically you have to agree to do the drug test, or your license will be suspended. But if you but there's no legal liability, I suppose is what I'm saying. If you refuse, you say, I don't want to give up my blood to the cops for whatever reason. Again, this guy was the victim. He's not even the suspect in this case. But they can't force you to take that blood, is my understanding, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, the reason why they want the blood is because it's a better detector of how much alcohol you have in your system. Because they got basically the 3 different tests. They got the breathalyzer, they've got the urine sample, or they got the blood alcohol. And the blood is the easiest way to make a determination as to how much alcohol is actually in your system. So that's why they want the blood.
Right. Well, I think that this cop he ended up arresting the nurse. The nurse said, look, we can't give you this blood because you don't have a warrant. The patient is unconscious, and the patient is not under arrest. One of those 3 criteria has to be met, and you haven't met any of the 3, and the cop goes, fine, I'm arresting you then, and arrest the nurse. To me, that's just an abuse of power.
It seems ridiculous. I have a sister that's a nurse, and to think that someone would go in to the hospital and force her to do that when it's against hospital policy and common sense really makes no sense.
Sure.
I completely agree with you. But at the same time, you got to think about it. If the person was a suspect, we might be having a different conversation. If the person was a suspect and maybe killing a family of 4 who's driving down the highway.
Well, at that point, and as you probably know, the Supreme Court ruled last year that they need a warrant to draw blood. You cannot just go, hey, we want to draw your blood because we think you're intoxicated. You need a warrant to do that. Breathalyzer is different. They can do that. But they need a warrant to draw blood. Supreme Court ruled on United States Supreme Court. It's the highest court in the land. So, if it were a suspect, even if it were a suspect, they still would have to have you under arrest. They'd have to have a warrant to draw your blood. They just would. It's simple. I mean, I don't know what other way to explain it. All right, Jordan.
Jordan, real quick,
yes.
If Rover wants to get his CDL, how hard would it be for him to get that license so he could drive his bus?
Well, you know what? If you want that, you're going to have to get your passenger endorsement. You're going to have to go. It took me 2.5 months of night school. Over on the east side.
Can't I get like Mario's CDL school and just pay the guy like triple and say that I went there?
You could certainly try, but no, the regulations are tough. You got to get drug tested, alcohol tested. That's pre-employment screening and all of that. You have to do a DOT physical to get your medical certificate. They got to make sure that you're not going to, have a seizure or fall asleep while you're driving, Rover. And it's pretty intense. It's over 120 hours worth of training just to be able to take the test.
He'll never do it.
Yeah.
All right.
That seems like a lot of work. I don't have that stamina.
No.
All right, Jordan, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Jordan Lebovitz from Nurenberg Paris.